Hello there, and welcome to episode 10 of the From a Certain Point of View podcast. I'm Josh,
I'm Adam.
and we're once again excited to be here talking Star Wars with you. Things have been winding down a little bit after the crazy months of November and December for Star Wars, but we're still here. We're still excited to talk Star Wars. And how are you doing this morning, Adam?
Yeah, I'm doing great. Yeah, things have definitely been winding down from Rise of Skywalker, but I've been kind of ramping back up since last week on Star Wars stuff too. I've been reading comics and I've been watching TV and I've been doing all this other stuff. So I'm uh I'm ready for a lot more Star Wars actually.
Definitely. I mean, I'm always ready for more Star Wars. I mean, I don't often suffer from any kind of Star Wars fatigue or anything like that. I mean, every once in a while I
Yeah.
might take a little break from it, but I always like to have my Star Wars fix. And with things like the Clone Wars coming up and a few more Disney Plus TV series
Yep.
coming down the pipeline, I think we'll have some stuff to
Yeah, and we've
whet
got
our
some
appetite until we get another movie in a few years.
we've
So.
got some Clone Wars news to talk about here in a little bit too.
We do. We'll talk about that once we hit the news.
Yeah, yeah.
Have you been watching or playing anything else in Star Wars this week other
I
than what you mentioned?
I rewatched The Mandalorian from beginning to end, back to back. I
Nice,
kind of had it on in the
nice.
background while I was working. I work at home, so I was able to do
Hmm.
that, which is kind of nice.
Yeah, I was
Uh,
kind of wondering what that experience would be
I
like to
liked it a
watch it in
lot.
that way.
It feels very cohesive, and
Hmm.
while I really love the one episode a week cadence that they have, and I want that to continue.
Yeah,
Watching it back to back definitely kind of pulls the whole thing together, and we'll talk about that more in a little bit. That's going to be our reviews segment this week.
absolutely.
But yeah, I've been watching some Clone Wars, and I started reading. I've been reading a lot of comics the last couple of days too. I'm trying to get
Hmm.
all caught up on comics. Um, I bought the new Star Wars #1. I haven't had a chance to read that yet, but I've been reading some of the older series that I've been wanting to catch up on. I'm getting ready to start Kanan, and then Darth Vader, the Dark Lord of the Sith line. So
Yeah, I've heard good things about that one. So
yeah, yeah,
definitely one I wanted to check out at some point.
yeah. So what have you been watching, reading? I'm guessing playing too.
Oh yeah, definitely. I've been again still watching Clone Wars, getting ready for the
Okay,
new
okay.
season, and
Where you at?
playing
Where you at
fall.
there? Just out of
Um,
curiosity.
I'm a few episodes into season 3 where
Okay,
we
okay.
were on Ryloth. There was some interesting stuff going on there.
Yeah,
Kind
yeah,
of some stuff with like the got into some political stuff a little bit with the Trade Federation and
yeah.
and
Sure, sure.
stuff like that, which is pretty interesting stuff. And
Yeah,
um, there's a lot to enjoy with the Clone Wars series. It's just there's some beautiful stuff in it, the way that it's animated, and just some interesting storylines, and a lot
yeah.
of the characters from the prequels that I enjoy. So I've definitely been enjoying that.
I know
And
I've told you this a few times, but you're gonna start getting into some pretty cool light side, dark side stuff here in the next
yeah, I mean
probably season or two.
the Star Wars mythology stuff,
Yeah, you're gonna get in.
the Force, the Jedi, the Sith, that stuff
Hmm.
is what I love the most about Star Wars.
Yeah,
So,
there's some really
yeah,
good stuff in it later.
I'm looking forward to that.
Hmm.
And speaking of that, a little bit, I've been playing Fallen Order and
Yeah,
finished
you were
my
texting me about it a
mission.
little bit. Yeah.
Yeah, yeah, finished my mission on Kashyyyk, and
Hmm.
then went to Ilum
You got that?
to.
You got that ninth sister taken care of?
Yeah, yeah, that was rough. That thing was a beast.
Yes.
And there's so much cool stuff in that game, like just riding
Oh
on that
yeah, yeah.
winged creature
Hmm.
was awesome. And I also witnessed Order 66 from Cal's
Yeah.
perspective when
That
he
was
was
a
a Padawan,
that was a heart
and
wrenching scene right there.
it was. I think it was for me the best moment of the game so far, just
Mm.
emotionally, and just playing the John Williams music that played during that scene
Oh
in
yeah,
Revenge of the
yeah,
Sith.
yeah.
So it all just added up to a really emotional moment in the game, which I enjoyed. And then I'm currently on Ilum trying to find my kyber crystal to create, kind of my own lightsaber. Um,
Okay.
so I love this game. It's by far my favorite Star Wars game that I've ever played. And I'm just as I've
Now
said
you.
before, I'm a
Oh,
slow
sorry.
gamer, so
Yeah.
I'm getting there, but
Yeah,
I'm
no, I mean,
enjoying it.
there's no problem with that. I mean, that this is a
Right,
game that
right,
is really, really benefits from you taking your time and enjoying all the little
yeah,
details and everything that pops up.
yeah,
Now
definitely.
you did get your visual dictionary, right?
I did. I got yeah. That's another thing. I got the visual dictionary. I've been reading some of that too.
Did you get to the Star Killer parts?
I didn't yet, but I
Okay.
think that
I don't
Ilum
want
has to be.
to. It is. It's
I
confirmed.
think it
Yeah.
has to be where Star Killer Base is.
It is.
Yeah.
It's confirmed in the visual dictionary. It was kind of a like a rumor or a possibility for a few months, but then it's
Right.
definitely for sure Ilum
Yeah. Yeah.
that the
I'd
Empire
been
occupied it.
thinking that
Yeah. Hmm.
as I was playing the game, I was like, this has to be where Star Killer Base was. So
Yep.
lots of cool connections and everything. So that's what I've been up to this week, and still
Cool.
enjoying my Star Wars time.
Awesome.
And are you ready to jump into our news segment?
Well, you want the bad news or the really bad news?
So the first thing I'd like to talk about in the news this week is the Rise of Skywalker box office, and I think there were a lot of people concerned after Solo underperforming at the box office. What would happen with this movie after, the divisiveness of the Last Jedi, the performance of Solo?
Hmm.
What would
Yeah.
we see with the Rise of Skywalker? I think it's been pretty positive so far. Right now, we have the domestic gross at 417 million, international at 423 for a worldwide total of 840 million right now. And I think, if when we tally it up after this weekend, I think they could be pretty close to hitting that 1 billion mark.
Yeah.
Um, if not quite getting there this weekend, definitely close. So,
Yeah. Yeah. Probably not
what,
this week. It's gonna hit a
right.
billion.
Yeah, it'll hit a billion, which, there's only 40 some films in history that have hit that mark. So,
Right. Right.
it's definitely a box office success.
Yeah. Star
While
Wars is not dead. You know.
right, I never thought it was going to hit Force Awakens numbers, and I
No.
thought it would
No.
be
It's never. Yeah.
I thought it would be close to the Last Jedi's numbers, which it might be. But yeah, what are your thoughts on the
Yeah.
box
It's
office?
it's it's gonna fall short of Last Jedi.
Yeah,
But I mean, it's a box office hit. I mean, there's no other way to put it. It's just, you know, it's
yeah,
the fans are well. So here's the thing about the fans. Um, I think the fans on Twitter go back and forth, and I think other than that, I think the fans are pretty much positive about this movie.
yeah. I think overall, I mean,
I mean,
at
you go
least.
outside of Twitter and you talk to people about this, and you're gonna have people that tell you that they really enjoyed it.
Yeah. Yeah,
So
I think Twitter is just a breeding ground for just like
Twitter, yeah,
negativity.
Twitter can just be a
Um,
cesspool.
it can be. But yeah, I mean, general reactions from people, I've spoken to really enjoy the movie,
Yeah,
and
yeah.
obviously that Rotten Tomatoes audience score is up there in the
Now
in the
you went
eighty
with
percent.
your family last week, right?
Yeah, I went with my mom
Okay.
and her boyfriend.
Yeah. How did they come out of it?
They really liked it. Yeah,
Yes.
my mom
Yeah.
loved it, and so
I think I'm.
it's
I think I'm going with my mom. The next couple of days here.
yeah,
But I fully expect that she's gonna like it. You
right.
know, even some of the friends that we went with, it can be pretty critical. Movies came out saying
Hmm.
that they enjoyed it. You know,
Yeah, yeah.
it's a fun, enjoyable movie, and I think that
It is. It
the
is. I mean,
fans as a whole, outside of Twitter, are enjoying this thing.
yeah, I think Star Wars is just one of those franchises that, and it's not like any other really, because you're going across multiple generations of for the past 42 years of Star Wars fans that are coming at it from different angles. Some
Hmm.
fans want people are really invested in this story. It's become more of a
Yeah,
religion
and
or a part of their life, and I think when especially those fans that really dig deep into this stuff and want a certain thing, the reactions can be what they are whenever that thing doesn't end up being what they thought, you know?
Yeah, a lot of people take ownership of these movies that they don't
Yeah,
have,
right.
and a lot of them forget that these are not movies for us anymore, and but
Right.
these are movies
Yeah.
for a different demographic that really isn't them, and
Mhm.
so
That's a very good point. Um, and I know you had a news article that you wanted to share about some possible casting.
yeah, this is
Okay.
interesting, and this you kind of have to read into this, and media outlets like they always do have been reading into this. But there has been some casting put out from Disney, and one of them is looking for an 8-year-old blonde hair, blue eyed boy, and an 8-year-old brunette, brown eyed girl.
Mhm. Yeah. Um, so of course, when I read that, I immediately thought Luke and Leia.
Yeah, that would be my first guess too. And a lot of people are kind of putting this in with the Obi-Wan series because I guess that one is 8 years after Revenge of the Sith, so it kind of lines
Yeah,
up,
so
right?
that would be the right age. And
Now, like I
one thing that kind
said,
of
there's
threw
some
me
reading.
off with,
Yeah, like I said, there's some reading into that, and
yeah, yeah.
but yeah, go
Um,
ahead.
it seemed to suggest that it was a feature film.
Right.
From what I read. But I think this has got to be the Obi-Wan series. You know. Um,
Yeah, that's kind of where I've fallen in with too. Like I said, a lot of people a lot of media play or blogs or whatever are reporting that this is Luke and Leia, but you have to read into that.
yeah.
So I don't
Yeah.
know.
Yeah. Because I mean, it could be other kids and something else. Who knows? But
Yeah.
my first reaction was Luke and Leia, and I would love to see a young Luke and Leia in the Obi-Wan series. I'd love to see um, some familiar characters in that show. Even thinking
Mm-hmm.
like Bail Organa, for example, as a character I'd like to see, or Owen Lars, or Baru. Some of those characters pop up in this series. So I think that would be pretty neat. Okay, so moving on, our next news for this week comes from Star Wars Newsnet, and it is about the possibility of a sequel series to Star Wars Rebels, um, and and this is a rumor, so this isn't confirmed or anything, so keep that in mind. Um, but this source says what we've heard is that the Star Wars Rebels sequel show is in development, and is set for 2020, actually, so by the end of this year.
Okay.
And it goes on to say, it won't be called Star Wars Rebels, of course, but it will continue the story of Ahsoka, and searching for Ezra, and Thrawn might be involved as well. So I have to say I'm really excited about this possibility. I hope this is true. Um, I think even though Dave Filoni's working on live action with The Mandalorian, I think he'll still continue to develop animated series, and
Oh yeah, for
I
sure.
know he wants to continue Ahsoka's story and
Mm-hmm.
Ezra's story, and um, I, for me, right now I'm enjoying Clone Wars and everything, and I don't know how I'm going to feel about it by the end. But right now, Star Wars Rebels is my favorite animated show of all time.
Mm-hmm.
Um,
Yeah,
so I
I
just
can see
love
that.
it. I think that it feels so much like Star Wars, and it
Yeah.
expands on the mythology of the Force. It gets into the whole rebellion against the Empire, which I love that stuff in that era of storytelling. I think just having this crew on this ship, and a couple of them are Jedi, but it feels like Star Wars to me.
Yeah.
And I
Yeah.
loved it. So I'd love to see a continuation. How do you feel about this possibility?
I'm hopeful. I don't want to get my hopes up because
Sure,
I would be
sure.
very excited for it.
Yeah.
And the possibility that it's out there, that's very exciting too. Um, and the fact that it's coming this year is even more exciting. Uh,
Right. Definitely.
I think that it was kind of inevitable that something would happen, just
Yeah.
because of how Rebels ends.
Mhm.
There's a lot of there's a lot of room left there. With what happened with Ezra, and like you said, continuing Ahsoka's storyline and Sabine for that matter.
Right.
Yeah. I'm very excited that the continuation of that story would still be animated because I think that fits the best. So
yeah,
hopefully
definitely.
it's true. Hopefully this does happen, and if it happens this year, it's an even bigger plus for me.
Yeah, a plus on Disney Plus.
Yeah, pun not intended.
Pun. Yeah, it might have been intended. Well, we don't want to get our hopes up because it may or may not be true, so we'll see what happens. But continuing with some animation news, do you want to tell us about Clone Wars?
Yeah, we have a date for Clone Wars for the new season of Clone Wars, and that's going to be February 17th. So we're
nice.
It's about a month and a half away from some new Clone Wars.
Yeah.
Now I
So
wanted to ask you.
I
don't know if this has been mentioned anywhere. Is this going to be a full season drop, kind of like they do with different shows, or do you think this is going to be a one episode a week thing?
Yeah, that's a really good question. So we know it's going to be 12 episodes.
Yeah.
I do not know. We don't know yet if they're going to drop them all.
I didn't know if that had been said anywhere. I don't know what I want. I kind of hope I don't know what I want them to do.
I kind of want it to be weekly. Yeah.
I wouldn't mind
just
it.
because I like the discussion that can come out of I think it benefits this show, our podcasting, to have it once a week as well. So I'm kind of leaning towards that. Of course, I would accept some binge watching. And speaking of binge watching, I need to start binge watching the Clone Wars so I can get caught up in time, because it's coming up pretty quick here.
Yeah, I'm pretty close to where you are. I think I've been doing a chronological watch through, and
right.
I'm pretty close to season 3.
Yeah.
So.
Yeah. So the good news is they're like 20-some minute episodes. So you can watch like 3 in an hour, pretty much.
Yeah.
Now, this makes me think of a question I have, and that is talking about animated series. What is an animated series that you would like to see in Star Wars that hasn't been done yet?
Old Republic something.
Old Republic. That would be cool.
Yeah.
See, I'd like to see live action with Old Republic. I mean, you could do both, certainly.
Yeah. Sure.
But for me, I think I mentioned this to you earlier this week or last week. I think what I really want to see is an animated series set during the time when Luke was training the new generation of Jedi and established his Jedi Temple, and just I think there's a lot of storytelling that could happen there, and you don't want to necessarily you're not going to get Mark Hamill to do it, in live action, and I don't know about.
He might voice the character though.
Yeah. And I don't know about like recasting, because we saw that with Solo where, people didn't have a great reaction to.
Well, the tough thing about recasting is it's so close to what happens in 7 and 8. Like, it's only 5 or 6 years apart.
Right.
So finding someone to take that role and, kind of make it look, because I mean, even with Solo, you're dealing with like different ages there, so it's kind of more understandable.
Right.
So I don't know.
So I think I'd love to see an animated series set in that time. With Luke training Ben and some other Jedi, with Snoke kind of starting to manipulate Ben and his turn to the dark side, and then you could throw the Knights of Ren in there. I think you could have a lot of really cool stuff. So
right.
I hope we'll see something like that someday. But But that is our news for this week, and we are ready to head into our reviews segment. So, Adam, let's punch it to the reviews.
My disappointment in your performance cannot be overstated.
Okay, our reviews this week is going to focus solely on The Mandalorian. And first, what we're going to do is kind of talk, since we haven't talked about Episode 8 in detail yet, we're going to circle around to Episode 8 first, and then we'll kind of talk about the first season as a whole and how it all fit together once it was all said and done. So Episode 8, Josh, kicks off with a couple scout troopers.
Yeah.
Played by Jason Sudeikis and Adam Pally. And I enjoyed the heck out of this scene.
Yeah.
I laughed, and I laughed again when I watched it back a second and third time.
Yeah, it's really
Just
well executed, really
yeah,
funny.
really well written. I love, I love kind of their frustration with how Gideon is killing his own men. And,
Yeah, that was really, really funny.
yeah, the whole, I get that point. Do you get that point?
Yeah, it was really well written,
Yeah,
and I think there's probably a new villain in the Star Wars universe based
I
on
know, right?
the punching of Baby Yoda while he was in that bag. That was rough.
Yeah, it was rough, but man, it was. I laughed the whole way through. To be honest with you, I don't know what it says about me at a subconscious level, I guess, but I thought it was hilarious.
Yeah, it was a great opening.
Yeah, and then we go into the whole aiming thing. They get frustrated, so they just start trying to do some target practice, and they can't hit their
can't hit anything. Yeah.
Yeah. So it kind of just a really fun opening there. Kind of that's that picks up straight where we left off from 7 with them capturing the baby.
Yeah, 7 leads very seamlessly and very nicely into episode 8. And it's just like in those last 2 episodes we're really in the main storyline here, where we had a few like side, kind of like I called them side missions going on in the previous episodes, but 7 and 8 are really focused.
Yeah, so then still in the same scene, IG-11 shows up, and he's been reprogrammed since episode 7, and he's now the nurse droid, kind of a an extreme nurse droid, I guess.
I think the way that they play him as a nurse droid throughout the episode, not only with Baby Yoda or the child, but with the Mandalorian as well, I think was really, really well done.
Yeah.
They really take advantage of him being a nurse now. So.
Yeah, they really do.
Yeah,
and it kind of ties into so episode 8 is called The Redemption. Part of that I think can be attributed to IG-11.
Yeah, definitely.
And we'll kind of circle back to that later, but even just at the beginning, it's kind of talking about his redemption.
Yep, absolutely.
Any other thoughts you think the title might tie into?
No, I mean that was the main thing I thought of in terms of redemption. I think he's that character possibly.
And then we go back to the bar scene. Cara Dune. We find out the Mandalorian's name is actually Din Djarin. Din Djarin, which was talked about before in a Pedro Pascal interview. That's for real now, and and Grief Karga, they're still pinned down, and
we also discover that Cara Dune is from Alderaan.
Actually. Yeah, right.
Yeah, that was an interesting little fun fact.
Yep, and he actually says her full name, and I'd have to look and see what it is, but it's it's not Cara Dune. It's like or Cara Cynthia or something like that.
Cara Cynthia Dune or something like that. Yeah,
something to that effect. That's probably not 100% accurate, but that
probably not.
Going from memory.
Yeah.
So they're still pinned down, and they're trying to get into the sewers to get out of this bar that they're stuck in, but they can't get
This was kind of a great standoff scene, like a great, like, kind of Western standoff type thing, and I think,
definitely.
And Moff Gideon is just played incredibly by Giancarlo Esposito. I think
love him as a character.
Fantastic villain. Very, very measured, very cool, calm, and collected.
That's the thing. If you could take
panic,
if you could take Gus Fring out of Breaking Bad and make him a Moff, that's exactly what he does.
That's it. So awesome.
Yeah. So he kind of he gives him an ultimatum. That he tells him this is some of the dialogue here was really cool. Because he's basically trying to get them to come out, and Grief at one point asks, more or less, can we trust you? And he flat out just says no. If I have the chance, I will kill you, but right now, it's more beneficial for me to have you guys alive.
Yeah.
But I loved it. I mean, that was, not something you always hear out of a bad guy. So I think that was a
Hmm.
really great section of dialogue there.
Definitely.
Okay, so at this point we get a flashback, and this is kind of where we get more of Din's backstory here.
Yeah, the bits and pieces that we've been getting throughout the season kind of come together completely
Mm-hmm.
here, and we see the whole flashback scene.
So it's interesting then that he is actually rescued by a group of Mandalorians, and they're actually wearing the Death Watch symbol.
Oh, I didn't notice that.
Yeah, so if you're
That's interesting.
familiar with Clone Wars and Rebels, even Death Watch is a group of Mandalorians that have kind of been kind of had an interesting history. In Clone Wars, they're almost portrayed as like uh, almost like a terrorist cell,
Hmm. Yeah,
and
they're kind of extremists, I
yeah,
would say. Yeah.
yeah, um, and their symbol's kind of this ragged, almost looks like a W type.
Hmm.
And if you look on their pauldrons in this scene, they do wear that same symbol.
Nice. I'll have to look for that next time I watch it.
Yeah. Okay, so back so after the flashback scene ends, we're kind of back at the bar, and this is where the showdown kind of blows up a little bit. So IG-11 arrives with the child, and I really loved how he's kind of protecting the child at the same time as blowing everything up,
Yeah, definitely.
because he kind of, and the advantages, I guess, of being a droid is he kind of puts the child behind him, but then flips everything
Hmm.
around so he can still face forward and shoot, but still protect the child as he's on his back. So,
Yeah, so at
um,
this point, he's become both a nurse and a kind of a
hmm yeah.
hunter at the same time.
But then IG-11 kind of gives Cardoon and Grief and Din the opportunity to get out of the bar and kind of
Hmm.
make a stand. But in the process, Din Djarin is injured pretty bad. There's an e-web in kind of the fuel container that or plasma container or whatever it is that fuels that thing. Um, Moff Gideon shoots that and kind of blows Din Djarin back, and we find out that he's actually seriously hurt.
Yeah, and I love how in this scene, as there's blaster fire going on all around, Moff Gideon again just cool, calm, collected, just standing there, and then
Mm-hmm.
he aims and fires at that thing, and just the way that he plays that
Yeah,
was
for sure.
was great.
So, Moff Gideon calls in the Flame Trooper, which that guy was pretty cool to look
Yeah,
at.
that was cool. That was
Um,
cool, and then we get some more. We were wondering, is Baby Yoda, is the child going to use the Force again?
yeah,
And
and
was
originally
he
you
gonna?
think that he's
Because
gonna
I
heal.
thought he might heal
Yep.
the Mandalorian, yeah. But then he ends up using the Force in a different way.
Yeah, he actually uses the Force to protect the group from the flames of the Flame Trooper,
Hmm.
and he kind of dispatches the Flame Trooper as well.
Yeah,
She
yeah,
kind of turns those flames back on him, and gets rid of that threat. But that also then means that he's exhausted at that point, and he can't use the Force to heal Din
right,
Djarin.
right,
So,
exactly.
but we still luckily have a nurse droid who's able to get them into the sewer, and then IG-11 hangs back, and we get our first look at Din Djarin under the helmet.
Yeah, and I thought it was interesting how in the first episode we had a situation where you know IG-11 was determined that it was all over, and he had to self-destruct, and the Mandalorian kept saying like, "No, I need you. You need to don't self-destruct.
Mm-hmm.
You can get through this and everything." And then we almost had a reverse situation here,
Yeah.
where the Mandalorian is like, "Oh, you guys got to leave me. I'm done." and
Yeah.
and
Yeah.
and now IG-11 is kind of there and saying, "No, yeah, I can heal you. You can make it out of here."
Yeah.
So
Definitely.
I liked that.
Yeah, me too. A lot. So it's really interesting that IG-11 is the one that takes the helmet off, and I think
Hmm.
that
Yeah, because he's not a living
it's not a
thing.
living thing. Yeah.
Right.
Um, I did think that maybe that was a tad bit cheesy, I guess. So,
A little bit,
but
but
it was a
I've
nice full circle thing, and it kind of because we know that Din Djarin has an extreme distrust of droids,
right.
and it was kind of poetic that happened in that way.
It was, and I think the whole season we were wondering is he going to take his helmet off in some way? And um, I think I had a feeling that yeah, that was going to happen, and it did, and I liked the way it happened.
Yeah, yeah. So IG-11 has a back to spray, and he sprays Din Djarin to heal him in a few hours. He says,
Hmm.
and then he kind of makes a nice little joke about his central processing unit has been damaged.
Right, and he's like, "You mean my brain?" Yeah, it was a joke.
Yeah, so good bit of humor there again.
Uh-huh.
The humor in the show has been on point the whole season.
Oh, really? Yeah, definitely on point.
Yeah.
Star Wars humor. I like the humor in this
So
show.
yeah, so we're down in the sewers now, and this is where the Mandalorian hideout was, and we find out that they're actually mostly no more. There's
Yeah.
a pile of armor there, helmets and
Hmm.
pauldrons and chest plates and everything, and they have been slaughtered for the most part.
Right.
There's a possibility that some of them may have gotten out,
Hmm.
but then the armorer is still alive, and she's actually cleaning all this up.
Yeah, I mean, I found it interesting that the choice that the Mandalorians made in episode 3 to kind of expose themselves to,
Right.
kind of to that town, but they were doing it for the Mandalorian and to allow him to escape. But that choice carried some consequences with it, and it sounds like the Empire came in and or some Imperials came in and took them out.
Right. Uh, some pretty significant things here happen with the armor. Then,
Hmm.
Din wants to stay, and he feels that his duty is here to, kind of clean this mess up. The armorer tells him that he needs to go. He actually his first priority is his foundling, which is kind of a cool, um, again, kind of a cool poetic moment that now Din, as a foundling himself, now has a foundling to take care of, which is the child.
Right, and yeah, I think it brings all that full circle, and
Mm-hmm.
from earlier in the season, I think we both kind of talked about how because he was an orphan, a foundling, that's why he had that attachment to the child, and it makes a lot of sense, and now his priority is to you know reunite the child with his own species, or um
Right.
and until that point he's basically the child's father,
Right.
you know
Yeah.
um so I really like that.
Yeah. Definitely. We get some cool dialogue here about the Jedi Mandalorian Wars. They kind of describe what the child can do, and the armor
Hmm.
kind of gives some backstory on that she's familiar with that type of ability, which is something that they encountered when they fought the Jedi.
Yeah, I still think it's a little questionable for me that these characters aren't familiar with the Force.
I was
Just
thinking about that, and it led me to this is kind of a deep discussion, but it led me
Mhm.
to World War II and Holocaust
Yeah.
denials. And the interesting thing about that is that you think of Holocaust denial as a recent thing you think of that as a recent type thing, I guess,
Yeah.
because we're so far removed from that.
Right.
But that mindset actually started almost immediately after the war.
That's interesting.
and some of it was kind of like propaganda. Like there was some of it was a cover up.
Mm-hmm.
Some of it, was just denial, flat out denial. Um,
Right.
but it kind of led me back to that, and so you look at what's happening in the galaxy here. We've had a reign of the Empire, which would
Mm-hmm.
try to diminish the role of the Jedi and turn them into the I don't want to say terrorists. But that's kind of where Palpatine would have taken that narrative, I guess.
Yeah.
And so I think with that forced propaganda, and then with kind of the nature of how that stuff works, I'm kind of accepting that, I guess.
Yeah, and I mean, I did just think about the fact that, like, basically the Jedi were down to Yoda and Obi-Wan, who were in hiding,
Hmm.
and then Luke kind of being the last Jedi, um, and so it's possible that not that many people in the galaxy were aware
Yeah,
of
but
what was
but
going
but
on there.
I do get what you're saying there, because that
Yeah,
is, you have to. I don't want to say some of that's a leap to believe in, but there is some pretty heavy critical thinking that goes on there to accept that the Jedi are a myth now. It's even so short
right. Even
after
so,
the events of Jedi. So
yeah, yeah. So that was my kind of one of my one.
yeah,
I don't want to say complaints, but
no,
just
I get it. I get it.
it was
Yeah,
curious to me that they made that choice to,
yeah,
you know, these characters don't have much knowledge about the Force or the Jedi or anything. So
yeah.
yeah.
So uh, Din Djarin actually gets his sigil here too, which becomes the Mudhorn, because
Mm-hmm.
in episode 3, I believe, he rejects the Mudhorn as his sigil because he was helped by, at that time he says, an enemy.
Right. Right.
But that you know they're not enemies, and they've come to accept that, I guess.
Yeah, and that might be the event that really brought those two characters together and
Yeah, yeah, kind of sealed
and
their
and sealed
destiny
their
together. Yeah,
yeah, yeah, yeah. So that's I like that.
and
That being the sigil.
yeah, and the Mandalorian, the armor now says that they are a clan of two. So this
Mm-hmm.
is
Mm-hmm.
Din Djarin's new clan, and
Yep.
it's him and the child.
Yep.
And then the armor has one more gift, and that's she calls it the Rising Phoenix,
Mm-hmm.
which is the jetpack
Yeah, so he gets his jetpack,
that we're
which
used to.
he uses a little bit later in this episode.
Right. So they go kind of deeper into the sewers, into this molten lake, because we know that this planet's name is yeah, I'm having a tough time remembering that
Yeah,
one.
I'm having a hard time remembering it as well.
Sorgan is the one that they went to in episode 4. That was the farming planet. Was it
Mm-hmm.
Davaro? Davaro?
Um, Navarro maybe
Yeah,
or
something like
something
that.
like that. Yeah, yeah,
This is the planet that kind of looked like it was, cold lava
yeah,
on the outside,
yeah,
and that's actually what it was. This is a
yeah.
volcanic planet because there's a river of lava underneath the sewers.
Mm-hmm.
Um, so they get to this river. There's a ferry there with this. It looks like an R2 unit, but it is definitely not an R2 unit.
Right. You kind of think at first that it's just a regular R2 unit, but then as it wakes up, it kind of rises up, and you see that it has like these legs that are attached to it and everything. So
Yeah, I
that
mean
was pretty interesting.
it has like an astromech head
Yeah,
and body,
yeah,
but
right.
it's terrifying once it stands up. So
Yeah, yeah. So it was something that somebody put together in that way for that purpose, I guess.
yeah, so one thing we did skip over here is the armor kind of has this really cool combat scene. After they leave, her, the stormtroopers catch up to her, and she dispatches of them all pretty handily.
Right. Yeah. Yeah. She's pretty a skilled fighter. It looks like.
Yeah.
So I wonder if we'll.
Some pretty awesome, shots of stormtrooper armor just shattering under her hammer.
Yeah, it reminded me a little bit of Rogue One, with what's his character's name? Chirrut.
Sure, yeah.
When the way he was
With those,
fighting
yeah, right.
the stormtroopers with his stick and everything, and some of their armor was kind of shattering. I like how they did that. That was cool.
Yeah. So there's an end. So they're in this tunnel at the end of the sewer, and there's an opening at the end of the tunnel, and they think they're free. But the Mando kind of does his little scan, X-ray scan, heat scan or whatever, and finds out that there's a whole legion of stormtroopers that are basically waiting for them out the door, and there's not much they can do. So enter our redemption, and IG-11 kind of knows what he has to do in bringing this whole season full circle from our very first episode. He finally gets.
He just wanted to self-destruct the whole time.
Yeah, he finally self-destructs, and
yes,
there's some interesting programming things that they talk about there. Mandalorian is actually, it's interesting how far he's come here, because he's trying to change IG-11's mind, this whole sacrifice thing, and doesn't really want that to happen.
Yeah, he's actually grown kind of. It seems like he's become kind of fond of this droid, actually.
Yeah. So
he at least knows they need him.
Right. And so he's telling him, that his programming now as a nurse droid kind of means that he has to be around to take care of Baby Yoda. And IG-11 says, "You tell me that he's going to be safe, and that'll fulfill my programming, and that means I can default back to my manufacturer's programming, which is that he can't be captured; he has to self-destruct." So he kind of, he gets out and he walks through the lava, which is just this really raw scene,
Yeah, that was really powerful.
Yeah, he gets outside and he does his self-destruct and clears the way, for their ferry to get out into the open, which is good and bad, because out in the opening, TIE fighter circles around, finds them, and that happens to be Moff Gideon.
Yeah, I just want to say that I think the way they shot this and the stuff with the TIE fighter, I thought it was just excellent. I mean, it was one of my favorite moments from the whole season.
Yeah, this was cinema quality special effects.
Yeah, it was excellent. I think they put a lot of the budget into that scene itself.
Yeah,
and yeah, I really like the way that scene was done.
Yeah, so how that plays out, Mandalorian has the Rising Phoenix, the jetpack, and this is the time to use it, because he uses it and shoots himself up over top of the TIE fighter, and then uses his grapple cable to latch onto the TIE fighter, and then you have these couple seconds of him riding the TIE fighter at the end of his grapple cable.
Right.
And then he uses the jetpack to shoot himself back onto the TIE fighter itself, which is just an incredible use of that stuff.
Yeah, it was great action. It was just awesome. Awesome to watch.
So then his primary goal there was to use some of his explosives, and he blows the wing off of the TIE fighter. And then he can get himself off. He uses the jetpack to kind of ease himself back to the ground. And Moff Gideon and the TIE fighter kind of crashes off in the distance, which, I mean, I knew he wasn't dead.
Right, yeah. And for me, this kind of led to what I felt, especially the first time watching it, I felt it was kind of an abrupt end, where the character, I think it was Grief mostly, who was like, okay, we're good now. We can go back to this planet being used for the guild, and Cara Dune, are you gonna stay with me? And then I thought it was just a little abrupt of an
I can see that.
of an end for me anyway.
I can see that.
That would be my only complaint.
Yeah, the dialogue there kind of wrapped it up a bit. I guess a little quick, but I mean, for me it was okay. It didn't bother me, but I can see what you mean there.
Yeah.
So there's some like I said, there's some dialogue there. Mandalorian Din Djarin it's gonna be tough to switch my train of thought on calling him Din Djarin over Mando.
Right. Yeah.
So he has kind of taken up the mantle of either returning this child to his people, which it's an interesting concept right there.
Yeah, because that might be a hard task because we don't
Yep.
really know much about this species.
And that's what we didn't really say much about that, but that
Mhm.
was some dialogue with the armorer. He has the choice. Well, he can either return him to his people, or he can train him, and then the child would then take the the oath, or the
Right.
whatever they call that there.
Mm-hmm.
Uh, I kind of think I part of me, like, I don't know. Part of me hopes that we do learn more about the species, because Din Djarin does ask, what where do I take him,
Yeah.
and the armor says that's for you to find out.
Mm-hmm.
That kind of leads me to believe that that is going to be kind of the objective here, is to find out more about where he's from.
Right. Yeah. It could go. It could definitely go that way for season 2.
Yeah, and part of me thinks that might be kind of an arc throughout the whole show. To carry
it
through
could be.
multiple seasons
Right.
of this show. And part of me is kind of nervous about that, because this species has always been shrouded in mystery. And
yeah, it's one of those things where sometimes when we get the answers to those mysteries, they're not as satisfying as the mystery itself. So
and that was one thing that I've read before about the story group, about the story group at Lucasfilm, and how this is always one of those things, like this species is always one of those things that Lucas always wanted shrouded in mystery, and they've always kind of done that out of respect for him.
Right.
So it's going to be interesting to see where that all ends up.
Yeah, definitely. I'm definitely curious to see where it goes from here.
Yeah. So Mando kind of takes up that responsibility. He says he's going to take care of the kid, and Grief has a nice little line. Maybe he'll take care of you.
Right.
Which it's already kind of happened a few
times.
Yeah,
Definitely.
But Mando takes off, and then we pan down to a wrecked TIE fighter, and Moff Gideon is definitely not dead.
Right.
There are already Jawas picking this X-wing, picking this TIE fighter apart. I keep wanting to say X-wing for some reason.
Right. Yeah,
they're already there. I mean, this thing crashed like 2 minutes ago,
and they're already ready to scavenge this thing.
Out of nowhere, there's already Jawas that are just picking this thing apart. But then Moff Gideon cuts himself out of this TIE fighter
with the dark saber.
With the dark saber, man.
Which was awesome. I mean,
it's one of those things, like I said this last week, but like you start dealing about with Mandalorians and with all this other stuff, and you start talking about the dark saber, because that was such an important thing in the
right
in the shows and the animated shows. And you wonder how, if they would even think about tying this in, and then all of a sudden, there it is at the end of this episode. It's like,
I was genuinely surprised by this. I mean, I thought maybe we'd get a character from Rebels or Clone Wars, like a Bo-Katan, or somebody like that, or even Sabine or somebody. But we get the dark saber, which is just a direct tie-in to the Clone Wars and Rebels, and somehow he managed to, whether it was during the siege that he took this from Bo-Katan or something. I'm sure hopefully we'll get some more backstory into how he acquired the dark saber. It really connects to Rebels and Clone Wars, and I thought it was awesome.
Yeah. So that's episode 8. And we wanted to talk a little bit about season 1 as a whole, and I mentioned in the intro where we were, I kind of took a day at work and had that playing in the background just to kind of let it all play out, back to back to back. And I gotta say, when you watch this thing the whole way through like that, and it's not that long. I mean, it's long, but I mean, if you can sit through an extended edition of Lord of the Rings, you can sit through season 1 of this.
Yeah.
It all fits together really nicely. And I know that there was a lot of talk about filler episodes in this show.
Right.
And every episode has a purpose. Episode 1, it just kicks everything off. This is the bounty. Episode 2, this was kind of the first one that was hailed as a filler episode.
Yeah.
And part of this maybe is a little bit, but then you get into the scene with the Mudhorn, and that has to happen because that becomes his sigil, that it becomes their...
It becomes very important.
Yeah. And that doesn't happen if those Jawas don't pick apart his ship while he's gone.
Mm-hmm.
So then you move from there to going back to Navarro and turning the child in to get his Beskar, but then getting the child back. But then then he's on the run from the guild, and that leads into episode 4, where we go to Swergen and have our little adventure there.
Mm-hmm.
But then we find out that he's not safe there at all. That the
right,
guild
it's not
is
a sanctuary.
Right, the guild is still after him, and so that leads into episode 5, where the guild is still after him, and he gets into a shootout above Tatooine and has to crash land there, and then has to take the job with the kid. I forget his name.
Yeah.
Takes the job with him, and then has to get paid to fix a ship. Which he doesn't end up getting paid, and he has to, literally give away every dime to his name to get back off of Tatooine. And then that leads into he's broke, so he has to do something to get money back. So he accepts that job with I can't think of their names either, but the crew where he has to break out the Twi'lek from the prison on the New Republic ship. And then, after that, we lead back into the 7 and 8. So it's like everything ties together there. It's none of those episodes actually, they have different stories, and they don't always tie in to what's going on with the child, but it's always about what's happening to the Mandalorian as a whole through the whole season.
Yeah, definitely. And I'm really looking forward to watching it in that way. And I felt as I was watching this season, I felt like this is really a show that would benefit from binge watching, even though I love the week to week thing that we've talked about. I think it would really be beneficial to watch it in that way. So
I think it does benefit from that, but like you said, I still really love the one episode a week. And
yeah, absolutely.
I want that to continue. I don't want that to change. But like you said, it does tie in, really well once you watch it all back to back.
Yeah, and I think looking at season 1 overall, I think it was really important for the first Star Wars live action show to be a hit, and I think they really succeeded. I think it's a big hit.
Yeah,
I mean, I think it really... Star Wars really needed that, and the fandom needed it. I mean, I think everybody was united by Baby Yoda. No matter how you felt about some of the other movies and stuff like that. And I think, for me, I felt like episodes 1, 2, and 3 were very strong. Episodes 7 and 8 for me were also very strong. 4, 5, and 6 were, while important, probably if you want to say, weakest episodes of the season. But I think they still, served a purpose, even though they were kind of slight detours. But I think that's how I feel about the season overall. I think it was
and even
really
4,
well
5,
done.
And 6, even if they weren't totally connected, they're still a lot of fun to watch. They're still good episodes.
Yeah,
they're not
definitely.
They're not bad TV by any means.
No, not at all. I mean, it's just in getting to see this bounty hunter in action, and kind of having those situations that he gets into.
Yeah, right.
Yeah, so I think overall season 1 was great. I think it was a big success, and I think it was just, I'm excited to see where it goes from here.
Yeah, definitely. Totally agreed.
So any other thoughts on The Mandalorian?
No, we got a fun little point of view segment here. I'm ready to get into that.
All right, let's get into our points of view for this week.
Luke, you're going to find that many of the truths we cling to depend greatly on our own point of view.
Okay, yeah, like I just mentioned in the at the end of the reviews there, we got a fun segment here. I think it's I think it's time we did this. We've been maybe
it's been a long time coming.
we've been maybe
With
like
this one.
dancing around this the last couple weeks.
Mhm.
But it's time that we rank our Star Wars movies from least favorite to most favorite. I put on Twitter last week that I kind of came up with this. It was a method that I learned about doing some other stuff in life. But I wanted to apply it to the ranking my movies just to see how it worked out, and it was interesting. And I the more I thought about it, the more I was like, you know what? Yeah, I think this is probably right.
This is the way.
I think you mentioned you might have 2 lists here.
I
Or
was
did
thinking
you-
about it.
Okay.
I'll kind of talk you through it, my process.
Yeah.
here.
I'll talk through it too. So
Yeah.
So then the one thing I wanted to mention about my list, and maybe this is going to be the same for yours then. I think that you can easily make 2 lists when you're talking about ranking movies. For me, my list comes down to which movies I like better.
Mm-hmm.
You can also make a list about which movies are the best made, and I think that could be two different lists. You know, you can like a movie even if it's not the best made out of the saga or the series as a whole, and you can not like a movie that maybe is still a well-made movie.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
So there's 2 different ways to approach this, and I approached my list by being a list of my favorite movies. So
I like it. Yeah, I mean, I both I tried your Excel thing, and it was definitely useful to help me figure this out, because I both love and hate rankings.
Yeah.
I love doing them. They're a lot of fun, but then when it comes down to it, I sometimes struggle.
yeah.
And with Star Wars, there's really some that are kind of switch for me and are kind of interchangeable, and I'll talk a little bit about that when I do my list.
Yeah. So let me kind of mention how that. So I made that Excel tool, and basically what it does is it forces you to kind of look at all the movies and kind of pair them up against each of the other movies. So you would take like the Phantom Menace and you would compare it against all other movies in the series as a whole. And I approached this by, would I rather watch the Phantom Menace or another movie? And then you go down the line: Attack of the Clones, Revenge of the Sith, Solo, all the way down to the end. And you kind of compare each movie against every other movie. And for me, like I said, I approached it as, do I like this movie better than the other movie? And so then what the Excel tool does then is it kind of counts up how many times you chose each movie and then ranks it based on that.
Yeah, it was a lot of fun doing that. I think my struggle with it was, okay, am I picking which movie I'd rather watch?
Yeah, and it depends on
which movie that I think is better. You know what I mean? So that was kind of
right,
where
and
my struggle came.
Yeah, and that's where we're talking about 2 different lists.
2 different lists, yeah.
Yeah. So for me, like I said, I approached this as a list of my favorite movies. So I went with which movie I'd rather watch. So. But you want to kick it off? Let's start with worst. So this is the other thing I want to mention. When we're talking about
definitely.
Worst, that doesn't mean that we don't like these movies.
No, because let me say that I love every single Star Wars movie. I mean,
and I will watch all of the
all.
prequels every time, and I enjoy them every time. But they're
Yep.
mostly at the bottom of my list. And there's also
Right.
another movie that we'll have to talk about in a little bit. But just because a movie is lower on our list does not mean that we don't like it or don't think it's a good movie.
Right. Absolutely. That's definitely one thing I wanted to preface this with, was that I love all Star Wars movies.
So how about this? Let's put it this way. Let's start with our number 11.
My number 11 is there's 2 movies at the bottom that I often alternate.
I put out on Twitter because everybody's been ranking their movies over the last week and a half. I said, if you put either of these 2 movies, I don't know, I know which ones you're bouncing back and forth between.
Yeah.
If you put any other movie at the bottom of your list other than these two movies, you're wrong.
Yes.
These two
We're not
movies
even-
have to be at the bottom of the list, and you can put them in either order you want, but they have to be at the bottom of your list. So
Yes, this is now an objective truth. The Phantom Menace I have at number 11.
Okay. Okay.
Sometimes I have Attack of the Clones at number 11, but right when I had to come down to it, there's things in Attack of the Clones that happen that I really like. Sometimes I like more than the sum of the Phantom Menace. So I have the Phantom Menace at number 11.
Okay, cool. I actually have Attack of the Clones at 11. For me, there's just a lot of things in that movie. There's some pretty rough CGI. There's some pretty rough dialogue.
Yeah.
Some of my least favorite dialogue in the entire series happens in Attack of the Clones.
The dialogue is atrocious.
It's very bad.
Especially between Anakin and Padme, and their love
That
story.
fireside chat is...
Yeah, it just doesn't work. It feels like it's trying to be Shakespearean, but it's not.
This is where, when George talks about a space opera, this is where space opera gets amplified to 12.
Yeah. It's like over the top space opera.
Yeah.
Now, I think we can just talk about both the Phantom Menace and Attack of the Clones right now for a little bit.
Yeah, sure. Sure.
So, with Attack of the Clones, the reason I put it above Phantom Menace is because there's a lot of things I really like that happen in it that I wanted to see, like Obi-Wan kind of being a detective and that whole mystery surrounding the creation of the clones. I really liked going to Camino. I liked all that stuff about cloning. I thought it was really interesting. I love at the end when we have all the Jedi showing up, and you see all the Jedi in action for like the only time that we've ever seen that really in the movies.
Right.
And just the Jedi at their height of their I don't want to say their power necessarily, but kind of. And then even though it's kind of one of those moments that's a little bit questionable, Yoda in action and seeing him being a great warrior, as he's referred to in the original trilogy. And so there's a lot of things that I really like about Attack of the Clones, which is why I put it above the Phantom Menace, because I think there's times when the Phantom Menace drags a little bit, and especially with the whole pod racing scene that just goes on for way too long, in my opinion.
Yeah.
Even though I like the Phantom Menace and I enjoy a lot of it, I feel like there's parts that kind of drag a little bit, even though the dialogue is better and the acting is better. Liam Neeson is probably the best part about that movie, in my opinion.
Yeah.
And it has the best lightsaber duel, and one of the best anyway, of all the Star Wars movies, with Darth Maul.
That's kind of where I ended up. Yeah, that's kind of where I ended up with Qui-Gon, and even Obi-Wan and Ewan McGregor in that movie is
he's great
still
too.
Great. I enjoy the practical effects of what we see there on Tatooine. It's less computerized. It's less cardboard,
jarring,
I guess.
And because the CGI in Attack of the Clones really pulls you out of it a lot of the time.
It doesn't held up.
It doesn't feel authentic. It doesn't feel real.
Right. Yeah, and for me that's kind of where I enjoy the political aspects of the prequels. I think that it's a very important story. I like seeing that in the Phantom Menace. I kind of like seeing how the Republic is operating at that time.
Yeah, definitely.
I enjoy watching that stuff. I like you said, the lightsaber duel with Maul. Some of the best lightsaber action we've seen ever. And the music through that whole thing, I love the music through that whole thing. It's just there's a lot of things about one that I think that when I really look at it, I enjoy more than even the stuff about 2. So
there's certain, and like I mentioned, there's certain days where I would put Phantom Menace above the Attack of Clones. These two are kind of, right. It's kind of like 10A and 10B almost for me.
I see that. Yeah. So number 9. What's your number 9?
Solo is my number 9.
Okay.
I like Solo. I think it's a kind of a fun adventure movie. It's I enjoyed a lot about it. I think it's a pretty well made film, even considering that it had like two different direct sets of directors on it. Um, but for me, it's one of those movies that I could take it or leave it. I mean, I didn't really need this one, even though I thought I did, and I was
Yeah.
excited about it. It never really quite landed for me in terms of being one of my favorites.
Yeah, right.
So that's why it's at 9 for me, even though I think it's a pretty well made movie and a lot of fun. There's a lot to like about it. It just never really is on the level. Never, it didn't feel like it was on the level of some of the other ones for me.
You're not gonna like my number 9.
I'm sure it is The Last Jedi.
Yeah, yeah, it is. And like I said, it's not that I think it's a bad movie. It's a well made movie. It's just that for me, when I look at The Last Jedi, there's parts that I really like, and then there's parts that I really, really don't like. And the parts that I really, really don't like, unfortunately, overshadow the parts that I do like.
Yeah.
And I can't consciously put it anywhere lower than 9. But when I look at the rest of the movies, because of those parts that I really just don't like, I would rather watch some of those other movies. So
Sure. Yeah, when it comes down to that, I can understand that.
But like I said before, that does not mean that I think this is a bad movie or that I hate it, because I don't hate it. It's just for me that for me at this point in my life, that's where it has to fall.
Yeah, and again, we know that this is a very divisive movie. I mean, there's a lot of people that love it and think it is among the best Star Wars movies, and then there's a lot of people who feel the opposite. So
I'm not going to disagree with anybody. I know it's going to be a lot higher for you. I'm not going to.
It's pretty high for me. I'm not going to lie.
I'm not going to disagree with anybody. It's a personal opinion thing. So
absolutely.
My number 8 was Solo. So pretty close to yours, and I'll just echo everything you said about Solo. It's a fun movie. Yeah. It didn't need to be told on screen. Right. It was a fun movie. I would like to see a sequel to it in some form or fashion to tie up some of those things that it left open. I think on Aaron Rig, I can always stumble on that name.
It's tricky,
but I think he did every bit as well as you could hope to do in picking up the mantle of Han Solo.
Oh yeah, I think he did great. I don't have a problem at all with his performance. Yeah. I really enjoyed it, actually.
I enjoyed Woody Harrelson, his character. Seeing Maul at the end was unexpected but fun.
Yeah,
it's the whole thing about it. It's a fun movie. It's not a bad movie. And
no, it's not a bad movie. And I mean, and the reason I have it above Attack of the Clones and the Phantom Menace is because it is a better film. It's better made, better put together. Right. Just the acting and all that stuff is just better.
Yeah. So
in my opinion,
your number 8.
My number 8 is Revenge of the Sith.
Okay.
Again, for me, the first half of Revenge of the Sith is a little bit, I don't know. There's still some things with the CGI and with the dialogue, things that I can't get past and that I struggle with. I'm not a fan of, people talk about loving the opening of Revenge of the Sith, and while I like it, I don't love it.
That in a little bit. Yeah.
And it's not one of my favorite, space scenes even or anything like that. And the whole elevator scene, it just feels really, I don't know, off to me. And just stuff about it that I can't get past. But I will say that the last half of Revenge of the Sith I absolutely love. I think it is has some of the best Star Wars stuff in it from Order 66 on. I think it's some of the most well-paced, best edited Star Wars that George Lucas did. And it's emotional and it's great. So that's why I have it above some of those other ones, but it's still kind of low on my list just because of some of the issues that I have with it.
Cool. So your number 7 then.
My number 7 is very controversial, and in talking about if this was a different list, if this wasn't my favorites, if it was best made movies in the saga, this would be higher. But for me, my number 7 is A New Hope. and
Okay.
a lot of
Okay.
people would put this in their top 3, and I would probably, if we were talking about just quality of filmmaking. I think A New Hope sets the stage for everything else. I mean, it
Mm-hmm.
was the beginning. It is so significant, and it changed the way movies are made. And the impact it had on culture is
Yeah.
just
Yeah.
immense. But for me, it's kind of, I don't know. I always, like I told you this. I always kind of fall asleep while watching this movie. I think it's kind of is slow in parts and everything.
Mm-hmm.
But there's a lot I love about it. I love the stuff between Obi-Wan and Luke, and him explaining the Jedi to Luke and everything, and giving him the lightsaber, and there's just a lot I really enjoy about A New Hope.
Yeah. I'll give my thoughts on that in just a little bit here.
Mm-hmm.
My number 7 is Revenge of the
Your
Sith.
number 7?
Yeah,
Your number
Revenge of the
7 is
Sith.
Revenge of the Sith.
Yeah.
Mhm.
And it made it a little bit higher for me because I really do actually enjoy that movie. I like the opening scene.
Mhm.
You mentioned it wasn't great for you. I think for me it's a lot of fun. I like
Yeah.
the space battle. I do actually like some of the inside of Grievous's ship.
Mhm.
It kind of calls back to Obi-Wan and Anakin, Clone Wars style.
Yeah.
Buddy action scenes type thing.
Yeah, I could see that.
Yeah, so for me, it kind of calls back to that type of thing, which is so I enjoy it.
Mhm.
And then like you said, the last hour of that movie is just wonderfully done. I love it.
It is. It is. It's great.
So that's my number 7. Number 6 for me, since we're talking about this a little bit, is A New Hope. I'll kind of echo the same things you said. The one thing I want to add, though, is that every time you're talking about a George Lucas directed Star Wars movie, dialogue always comes up, and
Yeah.
some of the pacing of the dialogue in A New Hope is very rough.
Right. Yeah, that's the one area George
some
really
of the-
struggles with, and he's a great storyteller.
Yeah,
and everything.
yeah, right. His, like you said, his storytelling, his imagination is, maybe some of the best out there. But
Absolutely.
but when he actually gets behind the camera to actually direct a movie,
Mhm.
it's rough.
And writing the dialogue,
Yeah.
as well.
Yeah. It's rough, and like you said, it
Yeah.
does drag sometimes too. I've definitely fallen
Mhm.
asleep during some of that stuff. And even like it feels like after they escape the Death Star that's the end of the movie, but it's not. You still have a whole act
Right.
after that,
Right. Yeah.
So yeah, for me, it's a little lower than most. And again, just like I said, I would rather watch some of these other movies. So
Yeah, just when it comes to rewatchability,
Mhm.
that's why I think it's lower on my list, because
yeah,
it's not one that I want to pick up and watch again
Right.
above some of the other ones.
so that's
But
what
I
you have to
can,
be careful about these lists. You don't mix up like best made versus favorite.
Yeah.
And I think a
Yeah.
lot of people do that. So it's
because I can totally see why somebody would have this movie near the top of their list if
Right.
they're talking about,
when you're talking
um,
about pop culture and
Yeah.
significance and things like that, then you have to put it higher on your list.
right, for
But
sure.
for me, when I'm talking about my favorite movies, it's lower. So
Hmm.
I mean, not low. I mean, that's kind of middle of the list. So
Yeah.
So you're number 6.
Well, what I'm going to say is 4, 5, and 6 right now are really difficult for me, because that's where the sequel trilogy falls for me in 4, 5, and 6.
Okay.
And so they're kind of interchangeable as well.
Okay.
If I'm talking about like what movie would I want to watch right now, it would be The Rise of Skywalker, just because it's recent and
Okay.
it's the newest one, and it's the one that I want to go back and watch right now. But
Yeah.
so this part of my list is a little tricky with how I approached it. And this is where I kind of looked at, okay, how do I, like a year from now, how do I feel these movies are going to be ranked for me?
Yeah. Right. Right.
So that's how I kind of had to look at this. And so I put The Rise of Skywalker at number 6.
Okay.
Just because, and the second time I saw it, I absolutely loved it. Third time I still did. The first time, I had kind of a negative reaction, just because of some of the pacing it feels rushed at times. There's some
Right.
convenient plot devices here and there, and some of it feels like, they JJ did the best with what he had, but Ryan Johnson, even though I love The Last Jedi, presented some challenges for JJ, and
Yeah,
he kind of
right.
had to. It feels like the Emperor was kind of inserted as an afterthought, and sometimes doesn't feel like a continuation of The Last Jedi, but it feels like kind of maybe a sequel to The Force Awakens. But there's a lot of stuff I love about The Rise of Skywalker. There's a few moments that brought me to tears.
Yeah,
I
yeah.
love how it ended. Um, you know, one of my only issues, what we talked about, was where at the end it's similar to Return of the Jedi and what happens at the end in the throne room with Luke, and I feel like it was done better in Return of the Jedi than it was in The Rise of Skywalker.
Okay, cool, cool.
So that's why I have Rise of Skywalker at 6 right now.
Nice. Your 5. What's your 5?
My 5 is The Force Awakens.
Okay.
I think The Force Awakens is just such a Star Wars movie, and I think that JJ brought back the excitement. This is one of the biggest box office hits in history, maybe just behind Endgame in some areas, and maybe ahead of Endgame with the domestic. I'm not sure. I'd have to look at the numbers. And I think it just really brought back the excitement of Star Wars. I love the opening moments of this movie. The first half hour is just so strong, in my opinion. The introduction of our new characters like Rey and Finn and Poe works so well, and I just fell in love with those characters, and it really made me care about them. And the middle of The Force Awakens can be a little bit of a struggle, but then when we get to the end, we get to that kind of space battle and then lightsaber duel, and I loved all that.
Yeah, my 5 is Rise of Skywalker. So, for most of the same reasons that you talked about. It's a lot of fun. It's a really fun movie, and it's definitely not the strongest of that trilogy by far.
Right.
But for me, it definitely deserves to be. It's definitely kind of around in the middle of a favorites list for me. So I would probably rather watch The Rise of Skywalker definitely than A New Hope. So it kind of crept up there a little bit because of that, I guess.
Yeah, same here. I had it just above A New Hope for that reason. Yeah.
Yeah. So we are on to number 4.
Number 4. My number 4 is The Last Jedi.
Okay, cool.
You know how I feel about this movie.
Yeah.
I think it is, even though it works for some people, it really landed for me. This on multiple viewings. It's the movie that I kept going back to and wanting to watch over and over again, just because I feel it's a really emotionally complex story. I think it has some of the best performances from the actors. I think that the opening space battle with Poe and everything is one of my favorite. That's one of my favorite space scenes in Star Wars. I love everything with the bombing run. I love how Ryan Johnson made me care about a character that I had no idea who it was Rose Tico's sister, I think, Paige. The way that shot, the way that it just made me care about that character that I had no idea who it was. And I just think there's a lot of moments that I really love from this movie. It challenged me, made me think about things in a different way, and it surprised me. And I think it really tried to push Star Wars in a fresh direction. And I love the stuff with Rey and Kylo Ren and Luke. I love all that stuff, and I love the scene with Luke and Yoda. I love the ending. So there's a couple things I don't like about it. Canto Bite I don't like, and Broom Boy at the end I wasn't a big fan of that. But other than that, I love this movie.
Cool. My number 4 is Rogue One. Definitely when you look at some of the best made movies from this era of Star Wars, that has to be actually higher than number 4.
Yeah, Rogue One's excellent. Yeah.
And there's really not much I don't like about Rogue One. Uh, it's a really well made movie. I love some of the score in Rogue One. It's kind of like when you look at Star Wars movies and shows that aren't actually Skywalker Saga stuff. So much of that music is always so familiar.
Yeah.
And when you get into different things like with Mandalorian or Rogue One or Solo, it's just kind of maybe it's interesting to see how the different music can affect you. But for me, Rogue One I think had a beautiful score.
It did. It's one that really grew on me, and
Yeah.
I love listening to that music.
Yeah. And I really don't have anything bad to say about Rogue One. It's just that when I look at movies that I get really excited to watch, there's three above that
Yeah.
I keep coming back to.
So I'll just continue this Rogue One trend because my number 3 is Rogue One.
Yep.
I think it is the best Star Wars movie in the Disney era.
Okay.
I think it really feels like Star Wars but it does something different with Star Wars. It has different characters that we're not familiar with, which I think was a strength because
Yeah.
you just have all these new characters and you're not really relying on any of the legendary characters that we grew up with, other than
Vader.
Darth Vader, which I feel is used so perfectly in this movie.
Yeah.
And with that hallway scene with Vader is just what we've kind of always, I think, a lot of us have wanted to see with Darth Vader, just unleashing the dark side.
Mm-hmm.
And the way that it perfectly leads into A New Hope, it feels like this seamless transition into A New Hope. And I just love Rogue One. I've mentioned before, it's my wife's favorite Star Wars movie, and every time I go back and watch it, I just feel all these emotions, and I feel like, wow, this is so good.
Yeah.
So that's why it's at number 3 for me.
I will say, and maybe if there's one thing that kind of pushes it down a little bit more, I don't really enjoy the CGI characters like Tarkin and Leia.
Yeah, that stuff kind of does pull you out.
I mean, it's really well done, and I don't want to fault it for that.
But it's still noticeable.
Yeah, and
yeah, it was a bold choice. It just,
Yeah, it was a bold choice, Cotton.
Mm-hmm.
But for me, I would almost rather have seen Tarkin recast, I guess.
Yeah.
So
yeah, I think
don't know.
I'm with you on that.
Yeah,
it is noticeable.
Yeah. My number 3 is actually The Force Awakens, and
nice.
When I first did this list, that was probably my biggest surprise. Was how high The Force Awakens ended up in that list.
Right.
But when I thought about it, I was like, you know what? It kind of fits. Because even back when Force Awakens first came out, when I was making a list back then, it was number 3.
The Force Awakens was my number 3 Star Wars movie for a really long time.
Yeah.
And until recently, when I really went back and rewatched Rogue One and The Last Jedi, and it just kind of those ones bumped up a little bit. But I
think for me, some of the stuff that you mentioned earlier just kind of makes it that way. I could rewatch The Force Awakens and love it every single time.
Mm-hmm. It's great.
It was, it kind of reawoken a Star Wars love for me as well.
Yeah.
Not that I didn't love Star Wars prior to that, because there was, but it had been such a lull in between major movies, I guess. And then when that thing came out, it was just like fire spreading everywhere. It was, and that feeling watching that movie for the first time, seeing the reaction to it everywhere else, it really, for me, it kicked off that love of Star Wars and made it even deeper, I guess. So,
yeah, absolutely. I can definitely even see The Force Awakens eventually going back up there to number 3 for me too. I think it's awesome.
So yeah, I was kind of surprised by that one, but the more I thought about it, I was like, yeah, you know what, that 3 is probably a pretty good place for that for me.
Yep.
So you
can't argue with that.
Yeah. Your number 2.
My number 2 is Return of the Jedi. I think some people have Return of the Jedi lower, and I never understood the complaints about Return of the Jedi. Maybe if I was a little bit older and at that time watched it when it came out, maybe I'd feel differently. But I think a lot of people had issues with the Ewoks. But
Yeah.
when I first saw Return of the Jedi, I was a kid.
Mhm.
So I wasn't bothered by the Ewoks or anything. I even kind of enjoy that part. Um, I love the beginning of Return of the Jedi with the rescue mission. It almost feels like its own kind of little mini movie within this movie.
Yeah.
Um, I've mentioned before, I love Luke showing up hooded and just being a Jedi, and R2 shooting the lightsaber out, and Luke grabs it, and that whole scene. I love the music and everything. I love the throne room scene at the end, and this. I think the third act of this movie is one of the best third acts in cinema history, with the confrontation with the Emperor, paired with the ground battle and the space battle going on. It's just, I love Return of the Jedi.
Yeah. For me, number 2 is Empire Strikes Back.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, and I know that a lot of people, this is going to be higher than number 2 for them. It's only one spot above number 2.
Right.
But it's, I guess, as close to perfect as you can get for a Star Wars movie.
Mm-hmm.
Maybe it's not totally perfect, but it's about as,
Sure.
I think it's, like I said, it's as close as you're going to get.
Yeah.
There's nothing bad to say at all about Empire Strikes Back. It's perfect quality Star Wars movie. So.
Mm-hmm. And I think to
So
go
you
off
can
of what
just
you
go ahead
said
and make
my
that your number one.
is,
Yep.
is The Empire Strikes Back. I think not only is, in my opinion, is this the best Star Wars movie ever made, but I think it's one of the best films ever made. I think that the way that it, as a sequel to A New Hope, just took the story to new heights. I think it has everything in a movie that you could possibly want. It has action, adventure, comedy, a great love story, um, you know, a great villain, and it just has all those things that make a movie great. You know, I just the lightsaber duel between Luke and Vader, and the implications of that twist, where he reveals that he's his father. I just think it has so many great things in it. One of my favorite scenes of all time is Luke being trained by Yoda, and Yoda lifting the X-wing out of the water and just showing him that it's not about size matters not. It's all about belief, and I just love all the mythology of it. So that's why it is my number one.
Yeah. My number 1 is Return of the Jedi, and for most of the same reasons that you said before.
Mm-hmm.
The only thing that I'll add to what you said before is probably what puts it above Empire Strikes Back for me is the redemption story of Anakin.
Yeah.
Bringing
Mm-hmm.
him back to the light. Actually, still some of my favorite Star Wars music ever is the throne room music, and especially that final, where Luke kind of unleashes his anger.
Mm-hmm.
I love that music, and it just chills every time I hear it.
Absolutely, I couldn't agree more.
Yeah, so for me, that kind of nudges it above Empire Strikes Back for me. So let's do this real quick, since this was a long talk. I'm just going to recap my list and let you do the same. So for me, from 11 to 1 is Attack of the Clones, 10 Phantom Menace, 9 Last Jedi, 8 Solo, 7 Revenge of the Sith, 6 A New Hope, 5 is Rise of Skywalker, 4 Rogue One, 3 Force Awakens, 2 Empire Strikes Back, and 1 Return of the Jedi.
And for me, I had at 11 The Phantom Menace, 10 Attack of the Clones, 9 Solo, 8 Revenge of the Sith, 7 A New Hope, 6 The Rise of Skywalker, 5 The Force Awakens, 4 The Last Jedi, 3 Rogue One, 2 Return of the Jedi, and my number 1 being The Empire Strikes Back.
Awesome. Well, this was a lot of fun.
So that was a lot of fun.
Yeah, definitely.
It was a lot of fun. So, Adam, do you want to get us out of here?
Yep, let's wrap it up.
I'm just glad you're here. At the end.
Okay. Thank you again for tuning in to our podcast From a Certain Point of View. Just like every week, I'm going to remind you to check out our website, FromACertainPointOfView.com. I know I've got a blog article ready to fire at any moment here, and I just have to hit the publish button on it. So be on the lookout for that. We are on Twitter, and we've been doing some stuff on Twitter lately at Certain POV Pod. We're also on Facebook, From a Certain Point of View. Our fan page is right there. And then the Discord server. Remember to join in the Discord server as well. So Josh, once again, this has been a really fun episode. I'm glad we finally got a chance to rank our Star Wars movies, and aside from the day-to-day changes on those, that'll probably stay the same for another couple years, right?
Yeah. I mean, I think there's a couple there that could, like I said before, could be interchangeable, but I think overall that's that is my list. And I think we could have maybe done a whole episode on our Star Wars ranking, but hopefully,
yeah, probably.
You guys have stuck with us till the end here, and just remember that until next time, the Force will be with you.
Always.